Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be comparing Samsung's Galaxy S23 phone to their new S25 phone that was just released. Now, whether you're looking at both of these phones and wondering if it's worth it to save a few bucks to buy the S23, or if you already have an S23 and you're trying to figure out if this is the year to upgrade, then this video is for you. I've personally been using this S23 for the past 2 years since it was launched in February of 2023, and it's been a great phone for me. I've now had 2 weeks with the S25, and the long story short here is that these are very similar phones, but there are two key differences that on paper are both big upgrades for the S25. So let's first start by looking at the overall design and displays. The S23 and S25 are essentially the exact same size and weight, although the S25 is a little bit lighter. While the S23 has a 6.1-inch display, the new S25 sports slightly smaller bezels all around, which allows a 6.2-inch display and an impressive 91% screen-to-body ratio. That said, both panels are the same 2340 by 1080 resolution, so the S24 actually has a better pixel density, but it's not really noticeable. Both panels are dynamic AMOLED 2X screens with HDR support, but there's a significant improvement in the overall brightness with the new S25, which has a blistering peak brightness of 2500 nits. That's in comparison to the 1750 nits brightness of the older S23. The other big upgrade here is that while the S23's display is an LTPO that can range from the super smooth 120Hz all the way down to 48Hz, the S25's LTPO display now supports refresh rates as low as 1Hz, which should ultimately increase battery life as it's able to adapt to the demands of the phone. That said, my favorite improvement to the display, and one of the two key upgrades that I mentioned earlier, is that the S25 now supports adaptive color tone. This is a feature that, when enabled, will actually change the white balance of the phone in real time to adapt to the ambient lighting in the environment you're in. This means colors look more natural and more paper-like. This was a feature included in last year's S24, but so far Samsung has not added it to the S23. So that, combined with the more wide LTPO frequency range, makes the display an easy win for the S25 here. In terms of colors, the S23 comes in Phantom Black, Green, Cream, and Lavender, with some other online and retailer exclusive colors like Lime and Graphite available as well. The S25 has Blue Black, which is what I have here, as well as the Silver Shadow, Navy, Icy Blue, Mint, Coral Red, and Pink Gold. Your preference here is just that, your preference. But it's interesting that they seem to be moving away from a true black as an option in a lot of their devices lately. Overall, outside of the coral red, most of the colors here are pretty subtle and muted. One thing I do like on the S25 is not just the matte back, but also the matte sides here as well. I greatly prefer these over the polished look of the S23 rails, which have really started to show their wear even though I've been keeping this in the case. You likely also noticed some light scratches on the S23's display here in the corners. This phone has taken a couple spills over the years, mainly due to me raising 2 young small kids. But I haven't had any major cracks or scratches, so the Gorilla Glass Victus 2 coating seems to be doing its job. And that same spec is carried over here to the S25. All right, so next let's talk about the camera systems. And this is gonna be a short section because the S25's camera system is actually the exact same as the S24, which is the exact same as the S23, which I am filming on right now. So we're actually doing some live samples here as I am talking, showing the different examples from the S23 system as the S25 side by side, so you can see how they compare. And now I've switched over to the S25 here to record this again using the selfie camera. And one thing I wanted to note is that with the S25's upgraded chipset, which we'll talk about here in a minute, it does feel like the camera app is just a little bit snappier. It's quicker to autofocus, it's quicker to process photos once you've taken them, and so that's a nice little benefit. There's also some other AI tools like audio erase, which allows you to kind of isolate your voice from maybe background sounds or music that's happening in your video recordings that you take with the S25. But I found that most AI features tend to trickle down to other Samsung phones as they release more versions of One UI for those older phones. So I expect that this may be something that comes to the S23 eventually. So I won't go into the demo here or really talk about any of those other features that feel like they may eventually trickle down to the S23. Let's finish out looking at these photos and video samples from both camera systems, and then we'll head back to the studio to compare, and I'll give you my findings. probably tell, the performance here is basically identical between both phones. Any differences in terms of brightness or colors is likely due to just the phone focusing on different parts of the image at the time. I'm confident that you can get identical results to the S25 with the S23, so I'll just say the camera system here is not a reason to upgrade to the newer model. That software conversation earlier segues nicely into our next section here, so let's talk about software. The S25 shipped with Samsung's latest version of their One UI, which is now on version 7. This is a skin running on top of Android 15. As of the day I'm filming this, the S23 is still running One UI 6.1, which was built on Android 14, but I do expect One UI 7 to come to the S23 within the next few months. So I'm not going to dive too hard between the differences between these two versions of the software right now. The short story though is that there are things that I like about One UI 7, like the new ability to search settings with natural language, like saying, make the screen stay on longer, which I found super useful already, and I know this will be a big win for all of us designated remote technical support people for our families. There's also a few things that I'm less of a fan of, like the new swipe down quick panel where, depending on which corner you swipe from, you'll either see your quick settings menu or you'll see your notifications. And then you can swipe between those two pages as needed. This will take some getting used to for me, as I'm so used to getting my quick settings with a swipe down from anywhere on the home screen. But now I'm forced to reach the top of the phone to swipe down from the corner to get those same settings, as by default, a swipe down from the home screen only opens your notification panel. Anyone who's used an iPhone recently will immediately recognize that this is exactly how iOS works. I recently reviewed the Samsung Buds 3 Pro earbuds, and my main takeaway there is that for the design, they've made a big change to look and function much more like the Apple AirPods. And I feel the same way about One UI 7. This feels very distinctly like Samsung is trying to make this version of Android feel more like iOS than ever before. And from a business standpoint, I get it. When you're buying a new phone, people tend to stick with what they're used to. And creating some more similarities in the look and feel between Android and iOS is Samsung's gamble that they'll be able to convert more current iPhone users to buy Galaxy phones. We'll see if that gamble pays off, but as an avid Android enthusiast, it makes me a little sad to see a company like Samsung shifting so much in this direction, as I fear it will eventually take away from the innovation we're used to seeing, which thrives on competition. As I said regarding the audio erase tool, there are quite a few other AI-powered features here that come along with Android 15 and One UI 7. But as far as I know, all those features will eventually be available on the S23. Plus, Samsung announced that some of these Galaxy AI features included in the S25 would be free for users for only the first 6 months. But they haven't said anything beyond that in terms of what happens after 6 months or how much we'd be expected to pay to keep those services. So again, I'm just gonna kind of gloss over those for this review until we learn more. That said, there is one key software benefit that the S25 has over the S23, and that's in longevity of support. When the S23 was released, it came with a promised 5 years of security updates and 4 years of Android version upgrades. So this means that this should be supported up through Android 17 in 2027, with security updates continuing through 2028. The S25, however, launches with a massive 7 years of guaranteed updates across the board, which should mean that this phone will stay up to date with the latest version of Android and One UI through 2032. So this is a major difference if you're someone who likes to keep using your phones for as long as possible. For that, the S25 is the obvious choice. That being said, the hardware is going to have to keep up for that whole time. And for me, the first sign of my phone wearing down is diminishing battery life. So let's talk about that next. Now, these are basically the smallest flagship phones that you can buy right now, and the trade-off is you're also going to get a smaller battery. And not much has changed here in terms of capacity. The S25 now sports a 4,000 mAh battery, which is a very small upgrade over the 3,900 mAh battery of the S23. When the S23 originally came out, I was quite pleased with the overall battery life, often ending my days with medium use with 30 to 40% battery life remaining. However, over the past couple of months, I definitely can feel the battery draining even quicker. So now I'm often lucky to end the day with 10 to 15% remaining. And on heavier days where I'm traveling or otherwise away from my desk, it usually means I need at least one quick top up for my battery bank or charger. Unfortunately, that's pretty in line with my experiences with the S25 so far. It definitely feels worse out of the gate here than the S23 did when it was first new. Now, that's not necessarily uncommon, as sometimes phone manufacturers continue implementing battery tweaks in the software in the first few months of a new phone's lifespan, and that can really increase overall runtime. But so far, I haven't seen any updates in that regard, so time will tell. If you have an S25, let me know down in the comments how you feel about your battery life so far. To round out this section, I'll just note that the charging speeds for both of these phones are again identical, with a limit of 25 watts wired charging and up to 15 watts wireless charging. Here's another area where I know that myself and many others were hoping and expecting the S25 series to launch with Qi 2 magnets inside to get that MagSafe experience for Android. But it's not here. This S25 is considered Qi 2 ready, but that just means it needs to be paired up with an improved case that helps make sure that the magnets are aligned. Then that's what allows the 15 watts charging. It's a bummer to not have the magnets built into the phone, and this is an area where Apple has a really long lead time here and a ton of accessories that are able to take advantage of that MagSafe functionality. Lastly, let's talk about internal specs, because this is another key area where the S25 has legitimately gotten a big upgrade. The S25 comes packed with the brand new Snapdragon Elite 8 chipset from Qualcomm to go along with 12 gigabytes of RAM. And I tell you, this thing is screaming fast. The S23 was no slouch, sporting the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 along with 8 gigs of RAM. And in real day-to-day use, I was never left wanting when it came to speed on the S23. That said, I ran a quick benchmark using Geekbench 6, and the S25 came out 30% faster in single-core performance and a whopping 85% faster in multi-core. This is a legit upgrade. And for any power users or folks who do a lot of 3D mobile gaming, the S25 stands head and shoulders above its older counterpart here. Again, in day-to-day use, the differences aren't so noticeable unless you're comparing them side by side as I've been. The S25 does perform a little bit quicker in all subtle areas that you may not otherwise realize. So it's not just the speed of navigating the menus or opening apps, which are faster, but things like scanning a QR code are seemingly instantaneous on the S25. So overall, it's a nice little bump in speed, although I have to imagine that the power on tap here is likely part of the reason why the battery life so far isn't improved over the previous generation. So do I recommend getting the S25 over the S23? I'll put it this way, if you don't own either of these phones and are wondering which one to get, I do recommend the S25. Even at a slightly higher price point. The future longevity in terms of future software upgrades here will pay for themselves with extra years of support. And the extra speed with the Snapdragon Elite 8 likely will help ensure the phone stays performant even as those years roll along. I'm also a huge fan of the LTPO display that goes down to 1 Hz and gets that adaptive color tone option. But on the other hand, if you already have the S23 and you're wondering if it's time to upgrade, I'd say you can safely wait this one out, as there's just not that big of a leap in any one area to justify a big cost upgrade now. So unless you're getting an amazing trade-in value or some other carrier deal, maybe wait a year and see what the S26 brings along. All right, I hope this video was helpful for you, and if it was, I'd really appreciate it if you can hit that like button and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.